Welcome to this video about the advanced combat tactics in Wartales. Here we are in the last scene of the Drombak. The first thing we need to do is prepare for combat. So, until you hit this actual fight button here, you can change anything, and this is a good thing to do. What do I mean by that? Yeah, you see that in this case I can remove his helmet stamp, and then I can go over here and I can replace it with another one. And this is what you do depending on what your opponents are. So in this case, it seems my opponent's likely to be the Inquisition, and the Inquisition like using fire, so I should try and get myself some fireproof items. Another thing you can do is I've got armor here that gives you a lot of good things in attack, and it just happens to be level 13, but it's probably not the heaviest armor. So I have alternative armors here, which I could switch the armor around and give him heavier armor if I thought I was going to be in trouble. Another thing I can do is I can change the armor layer. So by pressing shift and click, I can remove the armor layers and then put different armor layers on. And finally, of course, there's the weapons and the belt items. You can change all of them as well. So you can do all of this before actually starting the battle. And that's important, especially when you're facing formidable foes like the Guard, who are going to attack you on up to 3 rounds of combat in waves, or rats, or the plague people, or whatever like that. So, and some of them, like these animals, have a what I would call a traveling configuration and a fighting configuration. So I have to change all of these each time. So if I'm going to be moving this horse around, I'm going to have to put his horseshoes back on, for instance, and I'm going to put his saddlebags back on. So I'm going to change all 3 of those items for this war horse. And the same goes for the other animals, which normally I'll have a saddlebag on, but at the start of a battle I'll change it to one of these nastier collars. Before you're starting the battle, there's usually like a weather indicator at the top of the screen, and if it's raining, then it's very likely that you're going to be involved in mud. So you should think about changing your belt items to include items that include increased speed, so you can overcome all the difficulties of walking through the mud. There are also some foods that give benefits to fighting in the snow, and snow, so it might be snowing or something like that, so that could be good for you, who knows. Also, these will mean that in some cases they will produce mist, and the mist will hide the enemy troops, but there are also belt items that will increase your visibility, so you may want to change those when you see that sort of weather coming. Another frequent opponent you'll have, of course, will be animals. So the main thing about animals is they don't have any guard and they don't have any armor. So in this case I might consider going, you see, while you're still at this screen, you can change anything. As long as I don't hit this fight button, I can change everything. So what I might do is go to this guy, and then I've got another sword down here. This one, fervor, it gives 40% against targets without guard. So I might change his second sword to being that one. Now the other thing I might do is I might say, well, I'm up against animals with this sword. It might be better to change the oil. So, of course, you use up on oil when you do this, but like I could put animal essence oil on it. Just right click. That asks you which oil do you want to replace. I think probably critical hit's pretty good already. I'll get rid of that one. So now he's got animal essence oil and will automatically get an extra 25% against those animals, which he doesn't have to fiddle around with. Now this guy also has a torch with him. A torch is not much use. Well, it's extremely useful against rats, but not and against things in the tombs, but not so much here. So we can go and change his weapon from the torch to something like I don't know. How about this X? We'll give him I don't know, a rimstead throwing axe. Why not? There we go. So, and he's got Brave's Oil Concentrate. Okay, so that only applies to his other sword. Now this is an interesting feature, is that if we go to this one, for instance, he throws this hand bomblet, and when he does that, the oils on his other weapon apply to the explosion. So I've got a hand bomblet that will cause bleeding if he gets a critical hit, which is at 67% fairly likely. So on this one, I put bleeding oil. So every time he hits with that bomb, he will also, it will not only cause bleeding, but then he'll also cause bleeding damage as well. So it becomes a very nasty weapon, especially with bleeding oil concentrate. Another type of combat you have, of course, is against champions, but this champion, like all the others, has a stupid weapon. So if you look at his weapon, it doesn't do any damage until the next turn. So if you can destroy him before the next turn, you don't take any damage from the champion, and you get his weapon. This is your worst opponent in the game, which is the guard. They are generally a level higher than your troops, and they can turn the heaviest defender troops, which are the not only are they heavily armoured and lots of guard, but they also will attack you, in return. But one thing about this lot is they've been surprised, and they're also, as quite commonly happens in woods as well, by the way, that they all get squashed together. You can see they're all very close together, and this is fantastic news, because if you've got double armed troops, then they will be able to hit several at once. It's only when they're far away from each other that becomes a problem. But when they're close together, you can hit lots of them all at once, and they go down. Now the thing to notice also about these guys is this symbol up the top here, which says there will be 2 reinforcement rounds. So that means you'll have to fight for 3 rounds with troops coming in. And also note that you have fewer men than they do. That's typical as well for the guard. However, if you do defeat the guard on the first round, so that you can typically, even if you can't kill the last couple, they will surrender. Then you will only have to fight them for 1 round. Of course, you may want to get all the extra points for fighting them for 3 rounds, but then you've also got to take all the damage, and they're pretty skillful opponents. So against the guard, you need to be prepared for them to strike you back when you hit them. So your you need to have your head stamps. I think he's got one, such as enhanced visibility, which means that you perform an attack of opportunity if they hit you. You hit them, they hit you with an attack of opportunity, you hit them back with another attack of opportunity, and eventually they die. So that's a good one to have in this case. Normally that's a waste of time. If you've got more men than your opponent, you're probably going to defeat them. They're probably not going to have any attacks of opportunity, so that's a waste to use that particular option. This is a merchant party where the merchants are trying to escape. And so when you're equipping your troops, you have to think about in terms of can you engage those enemies to pin them down, and have you got weapons that will allow you to force those enemies to move, because the merchants will lose their dodge capability if they move. So if you have something that makes them move, then you should maybe change weapons to include that sort of weapon.